Okay, so when you hear the name Isaac Newton, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Probably an apple falling from a tree, right? The laws of motion, calculus, the guy who built our modern rational picture of the universe. But what if I told you that was just his public face? What if his real obsession, the thing he poured his heart and soul into, was something else entirely?
I mean, his public resume is just staggering. We're talking about the guy who gave us the universal law of gravitation, the three laws of motion, who co-invented calculus, and even designed the reflecting telescope. This is the bedrock of classical physics. He basically wrote the user manual for the universe, kicking off what we now call the Age of Reason.
So here's the twist. What if this icon of pure logic and reason was secretly obsessed with something that seems like the complete opposite of science? What if all that revolutionary physics was just his day job? Yeah, this is where the story gets really interesting. So let's dive in. We're going to peel back the layers on this scientific legend and uncover a secret obsession, one that has nothing to do with physics and everything to do with a hidden, ancient, and mystical world. Okay, get this. The scale of this secret passion is just mind-blowing. Newton wrote over 1 million words about alchemy. To put that in perspective, that is way, way more than he ever wrote about gravity or optics. 1 million words. That's like writing War and Peace on the side. This wasn't just a hobby, you guys. This was his life's work. This was the quest that drove him. And look at this. This is the proof, right here. This isn't some rumor. This is Newton's own handwriting. You're looking at this incredible, complex chart he made, linking Egyptian gods to planets to metals, you name it. It's like he was trying to create a grand unified theory for everything. Physics, spirituality, the whole shebang. For him, the material and the mystical were totally connected. And we're not talking about a brief phase here. This was a lifelong pursuit. It started back in the 1660s when he was just a young man. He gets his hands on these old alchemical texts and he is hooked. For over 30 years, he's in his lab, experimenting, writing, hunting for the legendary Philosopher's Stone. And the irony is just perfect. Later in life, he becomes master of the Royal Mint. So the guy in charge of all of England's gold is secretly in his back room trying to cook up his own. So to really get what was driving him, you have to understand what he thought he was doing. This wasn't just about mixing potions. For Newton, he was decoding ancient secrets. He believed these old texts held a kind of lost sacred knowledge, all hidden in a secret language. So for him, it wasn't just a chemistry problem, it was a code-breaking mission.
And the prizes for cracking that code? Well, they were the stuff of legend. You've got the big one, of course, the Philosopher's Stone, the thing that could supposedly turn cheap metals into gold. But for a mind like Newton's, it was never just about the money. He was chasing after things like the elixir of life, a universal solvent, even the primum ens, which is basically the primordial goo that everything is made of. He was trying to find the source code of creation. To him, this was the ultimate science.
Now, these alchemical texts were famously cryptic. They were written in riddles to keep the secret safe. So listen to this line from a book Newton studied obsessively. It says, "Cleanse the body of the king with a ravenous gray wolf." I mean, what does that even mean? It sounds like total fantasy, right? But to someone like Newton, who had the key, it was a perfectly clear set of lab instructions. The secret was something called a deck name. It's German for code name. Every strange word, king, wolf, Saturn, was a symbol for a real chemical substance. It was a way to protect their work, for sure, but it was deeper than that. They believed this knowledge was powerful, maybe even dangerous, and the code was there to make sure only the truly dedicated could understand it. So let's crack it right now. The king? That's gold, the noblest metal. The ravenous gray wolf? That's stibnite, or antimony sulfide, a mineral used to purify gold. And boom. Just like that, the magical riddle turns into a simple, practical chemical recipe. Can you imagine the thrill Newton must have felt? It's like finding a Rosetta Stone for the secrets of the universe. And their thinking was all about cycles and metaphors. Take a look at this alchemical woodcut. This wheel of regimens basically shows their philosophy. You don't get to perfection in one step. You have to repeat the process. Heating, dissolving, purifying, over and over and over. You can totally see how this would appeal to Newton's incredibly patient and methodical brain. This wasn't magic, it was a process.
Okay, so this is the big question, right? How do you square these two things? The guy who wrote the super rational Principia Mathematica is the same guy trying to decode recipes from dragons and kings? Well, the crazy part is, for Newton, they probably weren't separate worlds at all.
Just look at the ideas side by side. In his public science, he talks about action at a distance, gravity, this invisible force reaching across empty space. That was a huge leap. But in his private alchemical work, he's all about sympathetic principles and hidden forces that connect everything. See the connection? Both worlds are obsessed with invisible forces that shape reality. Maybe they were just two different ways of talking about the same thing. Which leads us to a fascinating thought. Did all this work in alchemy actually make Newton a better scientist? Think about it. If your mind is already comfortable with the idea of hidden forces and spiritual connections, maybe a concept like gravity acting invisibly across space doesn't seem so crazy after all. Maybe the alchemy wasn't a distraction from his science. Maybe it was the secret ingredient that made it possible.
So, when we put it all together, we get a much more complete picture of the man. He wasn't this split personality, scientist on one side, mystic on the other. He was one genius with one goal, to figure out the universe. And he was willing to use any tool he could find, whether it was a telescope, an equation, or an ancient coded recipe.
And this was all very real, very hands-on stuff. You have to picture him in his lab, furnace roaring, working with these exact materials. On the left there, that's stibnite, what he called the ravenous wolf. To him, these weren't just inert rocks. They were alive with hidden potential, the building blocks of a secret world. His search for answers took him deep into the earth, too. He was obsessed with reports from mines, like this one, that were full of things like blue vitriol. He thought these places were literally bubbling with the power of transformation. So his alchemy wasn't just pie-in-the-sky stuff. It was connected to real-world mining, a link between the stars above and the secrets hidden underground.
You know, for centuries after he died, these alchemical papers were considered an embarrassment. They were locked away, hidden from public view. It wasn't until the 1930s that the famous economist John Maynard Keynes bought them up. And after poring over them, he came to this incredible conclusion. He said Newton was not the first of the Age of Reason. He was the last of the magicians. Wow. So in the end, learning about Newton the alchemist doesn't diminish Newton the scientist at all. If anything, it makes him even more incredible. It shows us a mind that was like a furnace, a crucible, taking all this ancient mystical belief in a living universe and forging it into the hard, solid foundations of modern science. And that really leaves us with one last question to chew on. Does knowing that the father of modern physics was also hunting for the philosopher's stone make him seem less rational? Or does it make his genius seem even more profound? That he had a mind so big, it refused to see a boundary between science and magic, between reason and mystery.